It's about cars.
The fact that you do have real-life cars, you can build your own car, you can tune your own car. Just the amount of customization you can do on the car, you just want to keep going until your garage is full of like every car you've ever dreamed about since you were a kid.
It's about passion.
He wants to create the ultimate game, which is basically indistinguishable from actually driving the car. So he's just, he's really shooting for perfection.
It's the story of the racing game that changed everything.
You look at this game and you say, nobody's ever going to be able to top this.
This is the history of Gran Turismo.
Prepare to qualify.
3, 2, 1, go!
Ever since the earliest days of gaming, developers have been trying to bring home the excitement of race car driving.
2 laps to go.
Back in the days, games were basically in two camps. You had the pure driving simulations like F1 racing simulators, the Ferrari sim from Sega, and you had arcade games like the Need for Speed titles.
You had a Ridge Racer, you had very, exaggerated, power slides, you had the whole Need for Speed series, which was great. Those are great games, don't get me wrong, but it's like the diehard race fans were missing that, that one simulation that took racing games to the next level.
Upon seeing the power of the PlayStation, a young game designer at Polly's Entertainment named Kazunori Yamauchi is determined to change that.
Mr. Yamauchi is a very quiet man. He's not very loud-spoken, but you talk to him about cars, and he'll light up like a Christmas tree. That's all he wants to talk about is cars. He's a car enthusiast, and a die-hard one at that.
There's a certain kind of magic when you meet Kazunori Yamauchi. He's not your typical game designer, producer, president.
Yamauchi envisions a racing game with licensed cars, which players can modify as if they were the real thing. This game will include realistic driving physics and challenging gameplay. But the higher-ups at Polly's aren't as excited about the concept as he is.
I always wanted to make a game like this, but my bosses and people around me didn't agree. They objected to making this game.
Yamauchi settles for working on a different type of racing game.
Ready? Go! Motor-Tune Grand Prix!
Motor-Tune Grand Prix was Kazunori Yamauchi's first game. That was basically his first ventures into video gaming.
Motor-Tune was one of those things that you're like, what is that game? I mean, it was just wacky, weird, and then you sit down and you play it. And you start to see like all the things that they did right in the game. It's really cool. I mean, it's actually a very good game. It had a lot of elements that you finally started to learn its intricacies. It wasn't some little crazy kiddie game. It was actually a very, very solid racing game.
Motor-Tune Grand Prix was really interesting because it took kind of that art style made famous by Tex Avery and the old Warner Brothers cartoons, combined it with a racing game.
So I made Motor-Tune, which is a more cartoon-like racing game. And I actually made two titles, Motor-Tune Grand Prix 1 and 2.
3, 2, 1, go!
Yamauchi uses the Motor-Tune series to test out design ideas for future use. Each car in the Motor-Tune games has its own unique handling and physics. Making the series proves to be a valuable experience. Now, with a couple of successful games under his belt, Yamauchi pitches his dream game once again.
I talked to my bosses again, and by that time, I was able to persuade them to make Gran Turismo. I had more credit than before, when I had never made a game title, but after making the Motor-Tune Grand Prix series, I had my credit and realized that I somehow had the talent to make games.
And with that, Gran Turismo shifts into first gear.
Gran Turismo is Italian for Grand Touring, and it's a specific type of racing as far as specifications and classes and whatnot. They took the experience from making two racing games, making the levels, messing with the physics, and seeing what they could do with the cars, and took it to develop the first Gran Turismo for PlayStation 1.
As development of Gran Turismo gets rolling, it becomes clear that Yamauchi's vision is more ambitious than any racing game ever created, and making this game a reality will be a challenge unlike any he has faced. It's 1993. Polly's Entertainment is now known as Polyphony Digital, and Kazunori Yamauchi is busy working on his dream game, Gran Turismo. He believes that the key to his game is the licensed cars.
I think licensed cars is what makes the whole Gran Turismo series. You don't have licensed cars, no one's going to buy it, flat out. Take away the licensed cars, you take away the whole appeal.
Instead of kind of having generic cars and having about 10 to 15 cars to select or unlock, suddenly you had hundreds of cars and you had hundreds of real-life manufacturers and really a focus on presenting these brands in their best light. That was a big step for Sony to actually do this.
The hundreds of cars in Gran Turismo not only have to look amazing, but they also have to handle like their real-life counterparts.
And they take thousands upon thousands of photos for each car. Not just all the cars combined. Each car, I mean, they'll move the camera slightly. They'll rent helicopters to take pictures of the track and the cars. And they do also record all the vehicles, both from the exhaust, from the engine, and from the interior at idle speeds and increasing RPM.
They rented cars to race on a racetrack, and they took cars out and really kind of got a feel for how the car reacts, how the car handles.
Every car has its own kind of characteristics, where one car might have heavy understeer, one car might have heavy oversteer and slide around. And what Polyphony did was work very closely with the manufacturers to emulate all these characteristics that the vehicles have.
This level of detail does come with its own risks.
There are some casualties of war when making this game.
When I was working on the very first Gran Turismo, it was, of course, the first time for me to borrow so many cars from the car manufacturers. We were so excited, so happy, and we brought all of the cars to the circuit. We went into the circuit by ourselves and started racing. At the last corner, I saw black smoke coming up, and I thought, oh my God, something that shouldn't happen has happened. And I went to the last corner and saw one car totally crashed.
But for Yamauchi, the risks are worth it. And for every bit of realism he gives to the cars, he gives equal attention to the gameplay.
Customizing paint was an old hat, but customizing all the parts to get more performance out of the cars, that was really, really cool.
It's the perfect combination of gameplay and real-life car physics. It's probably the best there is out there. The fact that you do have real-life cars, you can tune your own car, just the amount of customization you can do on the car, from gear ratios to power bands. If you want to keep racing, you want to keep winning money, you want to keep buying new cars, you want to keep buying parts for the cars, you just want to keep going until your garage is full of like every car you've ever dreamed about since you were a kid.
Instead of you driving, your absolute dream car right off the bat, you drove a normal car, something you would drive in real life. Like you'd start off with a little Acura, and then you work your way up until you get these great Le Mans cars. And Gran Turismo introduced this whole progression and you work your way up towards the cool cars.
On December 23rd, 1997, Polyphony releases Gran Turismo in the US. The game features 150 real-world cars, a AAA soundtrack, and support for Sony's new DualShock analog controller.
The DualShock was brought out specifically to be used with Gran Turismo, and the DualShock makes the game. You cannot go back to using a standard controller with Gran Turismo. It sucks, flat out. The ability to feel the vibration on either side of the controller, the inclusion of analog control, it really was the next step in immersing you in the game world.
People's reaction when they first saw the first Gran Turismo game was like, they're like, wow, someone did it right. They created a great racing engine, they put great cars in it, and they put all, real world tracks, and they made this true-to-life, sim game that is, has all the bells and whistles that, racing fans want. I was blown away by it.
The replay mode was just out of this world compared to everything else on the market at the time. It just looked so stunning. People were squinting their eyes going, this looks really real. And the trick really with the replay was, clever camera angles, really good camera moves and dolly shots that looked like a real TV broadcast. And couple that with the incredible car models, and you had something really special.
Gran Turismo has been the flagship franchise for the PlayStation. It's a game that really sold the system.
You look at this game and you say, nobody's ever going to be able to top this.
Gran Turismo really made the video game racing scene evolve.
But their ambitious approach to the sequel makes them careless, and as a result, they'll make a costly mistake. By February 1999, more than 6 million copies of Gran Turismo have been sold worldwide. But as popular as the game is, there are some who are quick to point out its flaws.
The no inclusion of car damage, a lot of people are turned off by it because they want the realism. So they want to see their fender get crunched when they run into a wall. They want their handling to degrade.
Back when Gran Turismo came out, you called up Honda and said, okay, we want your cars in the game and we're going to bash them up really good. They're going to say no. Nobody wants to see their car break down in a video game. The inability to get car damage into the game really impacted the gameplay, and it affected it negatively in that you can bounce off the rails in Gran Turismo. And that's one of the problems that a lot of car and racing fans complain about.
Some critiques are more valid than others.
I still get complaints from players about the license test in Gran Turismo. Everybody says, oh, it's too difficult, I can't get gold. I just want to get bronze so I can get my license and play. Why do they put these license tests in?
Looking back on it, if I did not do those license tests, I wouldn't know how to play the game. I wouldn't understand the racing line, I wouldn't understand how to brake, I wouldn't understand cornering, weight transfer, I wouldn't understand how to make the car handle. I was a better game player for it.
The praises outpace the criticisms, and Yamauchi quickly sets out to create a sequel which will surpass the first Gran Turismo in every way. Gran Turismo 2 speeds out to stores in 1999.
With the second game, I think Polyphony tried to make that game more accessible to a wider audience, doing two different things. One, a much bigger focus on the arcade mode. Suddenly you had a second disc that included the arcade mode instead of it just being a mode of the original game. And then number two, the variety of cars was just, it just went up, way up.
Gran Turismo 1 had 11 tracks, 3 endurance tracks, and it was on one disc. Gran Turismo 2 was 2 discs, had 22 tracks and 6 endurance, so you basically doubled it with Gran Turismo 2.
Now, obviously, the inclusion of rally racing is more than welcome.
In their rush to release a game with all these features, Polyphony gets careless.
GT2 probably came out sooner than it should have. Sony was in a rush for the Christmas holiday, and the biggest mortal sin that Sony did was there was a bug in the game that didn't let you finish the game with 100%.
Gamers are really serious about getting 100% of everything or getting the best ending, so this whole 98% completion number really taunted them. And I think that was for the hardcore, that was a huge issue. Even though they had every game, they had completed everything, they had every car in the game, 98% was like... And also there were some memory issues where saving your garage, you thought you had a certain amount of cars in your garage and you go back the next day, you're like, whoops, where's that car? I know I had it. There was a bug that deleted cars from your garage.
Of course we learned our lesson. We decided to never release a title unless we are totally confident and sure about it, instead of rushing it through and sending it out to the market.
Regardless of the bugs, gamers and critics all love Gran Turismo 2, and the sales prove it. 1 million copies are sold in only 6 weeks. 1 year later, Sony launches the PlayStation 2. A Gran Turismo game is promised for the new system.
I heard about Gran Turismo 2000 back before the PlayStation 2 came out, and it was amazing. Even if it was Gran Turismo 2 redone with better graphics, it was still Gran Turismo 2 with better graphics. 2000 came around, and there was no GT 2000, and that was when they decided to change name to GT3.
Rather than rushing another sequel out the door, Polyphony takes their time, making sure every detail of Gran Turismo 3 is just right.
When I created Gran Turismo 3, the huge difference from Gran Turismo 2 was the evolution of the hardware. Gran Turismo 2 was on PlayStation 1, and 3 is on PlayStation 2, so there was a big change.
GT3 finally hits shelves in April 2001. And in just 1 day, it becomes the best-selling PS2 game of its time.
I was here last night at 8:30 because I wanted to be the first online to get Gran Turismo 3.
Although the game was delayed, I wouldn't say that the game was any worse than having to wait. It was an excellent game and a really good transition. And particularly in graphics side of things, it was like night and day.
Well, the game was amazing when you first looked at it. It was almost like you're looking at a TV and you're watching a car race happen right on screen.
My team and I were always using the maximum power that the PlayStation 2 had. I think that we used all of the methods that we could think of. That is unique to the Polyphony team to realize that.
It became so popular that Sony actually did a version of the PlayStation 2. There was actually a special Gran Turismo edition that actually had the game packed with the PS2.
Apparently that was their biggest selling bundle pack yet till this day.
Gran Turismo 3 is more than just a hit for Polyphony. Its influence will stretch further than anyone ever expected. The game industry is already in love with Gran Turismo, but they're not alone. Car makers soon begin to realize the value of having their cars featured in the GT series.
Gran Turismo series has also made cars popular in the United States that would have never been released over here unless it was for the game. The Subaru Impreza was a car that was in Gran Turismo and was not familiar with the American public until Gran Turismo came out. Japanese car manufacturers started thinking, wow, we should release these car models out in the US as well. So Gran Turismo helped car companies as well to introduce models into a territory that they may not have been considering.
After the release of Gran Turismo 3, Polyphony makes a collection of specialized games for a handful of car companies.
The Gran Turismo brand allowed Yamauchi to create different kinds of Gran Turismos for his own special interests.
A lot of American GT fans don't know about the GT concept series. It takes the cars that the automakers reveal at those shows and throws them into the game. And they add simulated specifications for these cars, and then you can race them around some of the tracks that have been in the Gran Turismo series.
The concept games aren't all that Polyphony is working on. It's no surprise that Gran Turismo 4 is also in development.
After Gran Turismo 3, Kazunori set out to do the next Gran Turismo. And he's been working on this game for years and years. And, you know, again, he's pushing things to the next level. More cars, more tracks, more realism. He's going to race a car on a speedway like Laguna Seca, time how long it takes, and make sure, like, in the game, the timing will be exactly the same. He wants to create the ultimate game, which is basically indistinguishable from actually driving the car. So he's just, you know, he's really shooting for perfection.
In developing Gran Turismo 4, we've been making sure that all of the aspects supersede any of the previous titles that we have in our franchise. So, we wouldn't be able to pick out specific areas. We would like to say that all areas have been improved and enhanced.
And while it's hard to believe, the team will push the PS2 hardware even further than before.
Now you look at a still screenshot of Gran Turismo 4, and I think it's one of the first games where you actually sort of have to squint and really wonder, is that real? Is it a real photograph, or is it a video game?
And once again, Polyphony takes their time to ensure GT4 is everything they envision it to be.
Gran Turismo 4 was supposed to be out for the holiday season in 2004, and it got delayed sort of at the last minute because Kazunori is such a perfectionist about these things.
To him, it's not just a video game, it's not just a simulation. He calls it an encyclopedia. He wants to have people look at this disc in 5 to 10 years and say, oh wow, I don't remember that car. He's making his life's passion.
But the delays have claimed a casualty.
The big thing he had promised for Gran Turismo 4 was the idea of bringing in online racing to it. And that was going to be the big selling point.
Sony dropped the bomb that it wouldn't be able to release Gran Turismo with online play and make any sort of realistic release calendar.
Already, there are plans for future Gran Turismo games.
One thing that's coming forward is the PSP version of Gran Turismo. Like any hardware platform that Sony launches, there'll be a Gran Turismo.
But the future will also bring new challenges.
Kazunori's focused very much on the simulation aspect of the game, and we've seen other, you know, arcade-style games come in, like Burnout 3, that are tons of fun to play. And one of my frustrations with the Gran Turismo series has always been that it's almost so realistic that it's no longer fun. I think what he's going to have to, you know, think about going forward is, how do I keep making the game really fun for those arcade racing players while still creating a game that's the ultimate driving simulator?
Today, Polyphony's Gran Turismo series has sold more than 33 million copies worldwide and spawned numerous copycats.
Gran Turismo really, you know, served as a wake-up call to the rest of the industry. We saw a lot of Gran Turismo clones on the market. In recent times, you've seen R-Racing Evolution from Namco. You had Project Gotham Racing on the Xbox. All games that attempted to be very much like Gran Turismo.
No matter what may come in the future, gamers will always remember the Gran Turismo franchise as the ultimate driving simulator.
Gran Turismo is getting players into racing games. It's creating this whole new generation of gearheads.
It's the ultimate car simulator. gameplay is great, the driving physics are awesome. It's a fun game to play, and anybody that likes cars, anybody that likes racing, the game automatically appeals to them.
What's so amazing about Cause is he's not that cocky. You know, he just wants to put out a great game, and he's so passionate about it. Hey, this guy is putting his life, heart, and soul into this game.
I'm always surprised by the great success that we've had. Even today, it feels surreal.
I just needed a little help.
Tired of pounding buttons.
There's a lot of pressure from other gamers.
Who's to say what's right and what's wrong?
They made the codes.
It's just so easy.
Put in the code. Put in the code. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Get the latest cheat codes and walkthrough strategies for Half-Life 2.
I'm afraid I'm flying blind here.
Don't worry, I'll get you over the hump.
Cheat with Kristen Holt, Tuesday night at 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific.